Hey, welcome back here to Big Sports Radio. Larry, Mike, and Brad, and we are joined for the first time on the show by a guy who's going to give us the skinny on the Indiana Hoosiers. Shannon Griffith. He's with the Indiana BLEAV Network. Does Hoosiers football tailgate. Former college football coach for years. You may know him as Coach Griff. We'll just call him Shannon. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very appreciative of you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little football here. I want to get to hoops in a minute, but new regime. We were hoping Tom Allen could get things accomplished. He didn't. He's out, and so now we've got a new staff in place, and hope springs eternal in Bloomington.
Yeah, Coach Cignetti coming in from James Madison, where he had a really quick rise to fame there after they went from football champion subdivision to the true Division I level there at JMU. And the first season there, he took them to be a top 25 team. And I believe they won their conference. And he's been known for fast turnarounds wherever he's been. Prior to that, he was at Elon. They had won 8. They were 8-45 in the last 4 or 5 years. He came in the first year and got him into the conference championship game, oddly enough, against James Madison that year. But they were 8-1 overall. And so from that standpoint, he's moved quickly up the ranks, but he started with Nick Saban on his first staff at Alabama as a wide receiver coach and a recruiting coordinator. So he was able to observe from the ground up how Nick Saban ran his program there at Alabama, and kind of an odd choice for Division I assistant, especially at Alabama. He took a D2 job as a head coach at Indiana, Pennsylvania. His father had actually been there and a quite well-known coach at Indiana, PA. And he took that job as his first head coaching job. And so he took a little bit different path, as most guys would say, because if you're at Alabama and you're, under Nick Saban, you're going to have some good chances for some D1 jobs, but he didn't let the level affect him. He wanted to go put his craft to work as a head football coach, design his blueprint as how he calls it and how he likes to implement it. And he's done it ever since, and he's won. I should say.
The interesting thing too is Coach Cignetti's got to feel a little bit on the lucky side when you look at the schedule. 2 ranked teams on there this year versus comparing that, let's say, to Purdue and Illinois, who also aren't the most powerful teams in the Big Ten, and they're doubled up with 4 ranked teams on their schedule. Is there a chance that Indiana could maybe be one of those teams that kind of shocks the country this year?
Well, there's no question with their schedule. They have 8 home games, which is kind of unheard of. But they bought out of the Louisville game. That was a 2-year deal to add Western Illinois, which ultimately gave them that 8th home game with everything that changed over. They're going to be one of the least traveled football team in the Big Ten Conference this year. And it's legitimately to think they could be 6-0 with a bye before playing Nebraska at home. But that would require them to beat Maryland and UCLA, which is a trip out to UCLA. Both good football clubs, but not clubs that you don't look at as, they don't have a prayer. I think they've got really good shots there. And if they can take care of FIU, which is going to be a better team under Coach McIntyre down there, and then Western Illinois, they got to go and beat these type of teams with UCLA and Maryland in order for them to have that year where they could win 8 games or whatever. But worst case scenario, be 4-2, come with that week off before playing Nebraska, which will be a big help for them because Nebraska has got the most returning starters of any Big Ten team. So Coach Rule out there in Lincoln has got a ball club that he's ready to unleash, and they may surprise a lot of people in the Big Ten this year.
Talking with Shannon Griffith of the Indiana BLEAV Network and Hoosiers Football Tailgate, one of the shows that he does in the great state of Indiana. What's the conversation been like over there in Bloomington in terms of the expanded Pac-12? You mentioned, and that's one thing we've talked about again, that everyone's a little bit of a panic because you're bringing in four really good programs, football-wise.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you can't play all those teams every year. So, as you just pointed out, what's the conversation been like there, and the temperature on this new world of the Big Ten?
Well, I think from the coach's standpoint, they all, like getting rid of the divisions in the Big Ten that they've been under for quite a few years, because Indiana was in the East, which meant they would always have to play Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan in that realm of possibility, which was a tough division for them as opposed to the West. But now that they're out of that, in this schedule, being one that's gonna people are gonna roll on and roll off. Indiana may have gotten the luck of the draw this year, like you said, not having to play four ranked teams that or all the West Coast teams per se. But I think for them, for everybody that's involved, or everyone that I have talked to, excitement, and they do like the new setup with the other teams coming in and getting rid of the structure of an East and West division.
If I was to ask you if player X has a good season, Indiana fans are going to be happy, who would be the player that is the fulcrum to Indiana playing well and being successful this season?
Well, Curt really remade this roster via the portal, and his objective was to take kids that had a body of work rather than potential. So he looked for guys that had a body of work, not somebody that they think has potential to be a player. So to me, it starts with the quarterback position. They got Curtis Rourke from Ohio University, who was the Mid-American Conference Player of the Year in 2022. Had a little bit of an injury bug last year at Ohio, which caused him to miss quite a few games. But as any Big Ten team goes, the trigger man is what propels you in the Big Ten or any conference for that matter. And if like your question stated, if Curtis Rourke can play to the level that people think he can, then I do think Indiana has a really good shot to be a team that surprises some people in the Big Ten based upon the schedule that they have.
Turn now to basketball, Shannon. As I don't, maybe Illinois made a big splash, I guess, with getting some players from overseas, but I'm not sure there's a Big Ten team that made a bigger impact in the offseason transfer portal than Indiana. You talk about remaking a team. This Hoosier team this year just looks and feels a lot different from any team that Coach Woodson's had there.
Well, there's no question about that. And while most of my focus is on the football side of the equation, anybody that lives and grows up in Indiana better have a little bit of knowledge of Indiana basketball, or they revoke your statesmanship and kick you out of Indiana. So there's no question that Coach Woodson utilized the portal to bring in 4 top-notch players that really looks to propel them as a basketball team to one that can be a contender, not only in the Big Ten, but on the national scene. Now, they've done that because Indiana's NIL money is better than what people think. And even in football, Coach Cignetti said when they were going through the process, they kind of said, this is, here's what you're going to work with X, but the reality of it is they had Y. So they've really worked hard at Indiana in bringing in the dollars so they can get competitive with the bigger name teams, whether it's in football or basketball. And Coach Woodson brought in 4 guys that I think are top line players, and the pressure's on him this year to win. I think, Indiana, former Indiana player under Bob Knight, I think there was a lot of expectations of him coming in. I don't necessarily think he's met those expectations to the level that Indiana fans expect. And but with these new players in the the hype that they have gotten in terms of their ability and what it could mean for Indiana, seat's getting a little warmer for Coach Woodson, just because this is going to be a team that has been completely remade. And when you talk about 5 bodies on the court,
How tough is it on Coach Woodson to have year after year to have Purdue above Indiana? And I've even seen people say that now Purdue is the basketball program in the state of Indiana. Is that something that wears heavily on the Indiana fan base?
Yes. And quite simply, it's that easy to say. If somebody told you any different, they'd be lying to you. But there's no question, Purdue's success has made it even Indiana's job, irregardless of who the head coach is, a much tougher job in terms of expectations, because people are going to say, look what Purdue's done with Painter and, all the success that he has. One thing that I point out to people is go look of how long Matt Painter's been at Purdue. They had a tremendous amount of patience with Coach Painter when you really look at it, where he was kind of getting to almost to the mountaintop and then falling off for whatever reason and falling short. And, the last 2 years has really propelled him on not only the Big Ten level, but also on the national level. But you're right, it does create a little bit more of, hey, look at our partners right down the road here off of Highway 65. We want that. And I don't think any Hoosier fan is short of saying that outwardly and not being afraid from blowback. But that's what they want. I mean, they want a team like Purdue has in terms of their competitiveness. I always thought they played a scrappy type of game of basketball based upon the talent they had on the floor. And I do think that, Indiana has to, in some ways, has to find that grittiness that they need to win in the Big Ten night in, night out.
And to your point, it may be finding that coach, like you said, that's going to be there for 20 years, which is hard to find now. And it's probably have to be a former Purdue guy like with Woodson. And I think he would, if Woodson doesn't work out, that's what you'd look for. Who's that young up and comer who's willing to stay here? And people forget, Painter had one foot out the door to go to Missouri several years ago and came back, and look at what happened since then. You're exactly right. Shannon, we appreciate your time. Great insight also on Coach Cignetti and what he's done. His background with Indiana. I'm not sure a lot of our listeners know all about that, but we appreciate your time. Good luck in this, hopefully an undefeated start, and look forward to talking to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm sorry I walked on you there, but
no, you're good.
But I do appreciate you guys having me on, and anytime I can be of assistance from here in Indiana, by all means, give me a shout. I'm a little perturbed that we're not playing Illinois this year because it's so close. You think they'd have a little bit more regional bias in their setting up of schedule in football, but it is what it is. But we'll catch each other down the road. And I do think Coach Bielema is going to have a pretty darn good Illinois football team this year too.
Yeah, I think the thing with Illinois, and you would appreciate this, and Mike and I've talked about this, and Brad, that Illinois, they can't put together winning seasons. It's just one of those things that, and I think Indiana a little bit of the same. You get the one excitement, and you go back to 5-7 the next year. Something I wrote for IlliniGuys.com. I think it's happened. I think there's only been 2 coaches, not 2 seasons, but 2 coaches to put together back-to-back 8-win seasons in school history. Not the past 20 years, in school history. 4 top 10 finishes in the past 70 years. It just, but to your point, I think Brett, like you said, I think Brett Bielema is that guy at Illinois that's, if they give him time, if he's willing to stay, 10 years, 12 years. He's got 2 little girls now, grade school age, close enough to family. This may be a place where he's ready to settle down and stick around if they can all come together, and we'll see what this fall has in store for Illini. So, yeah, no question. Shannon, thanks so much, man. We'll talk with you soon.
All right, partners. Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. Shannon Griffith, once again, he's with the Indiana BLEAV Network. It does the Hoosiers football tailgate show. Man, really knows this stuff. Just have to give him a follow on X. Coach Griff, former college football coach. We appreciate his time right here. Keep it here. We've got much more to come here on Big Sports Radio.